I sense the tension in your soul, like an invisible presence occupying every dark corner within you. A shadow that cannot be seen but is distinctly felt. You cannot forgive because with every step you take, it remains ever present, like a reflection in the mirror. This must be a great pain, mustn't it? I understand. The pain does not only come from the actions of others, but also from your own inability to let go within your heart. But could this pain be something you have created for yourself? When you think about forgiveness, is there always something holding you back, like an invisible wall between you and liberation? I see it in the words you have not yet spoken, in the gestures you cannot fully express. Do you know that sometimes the act of not forgiving is a way we protect ourselves from the deep pain we are not ready to face? Let us step into a different space together, a space where your shadow becomes clearer. You see, the shadow is not your enemy. It is merely a part of you that you have not yet accepted, not yet reconciled with. That shadow, like the dark parts within each of us, is what hinders not only forgiveness for others but also forgiveness for yourself. Do you have the courage to face your shadow? Can you look into the mirror and realize that the pain, anger, and dissatisfaction are not things you need to nurture forever? Ask yourself, what is the shadow? Is it the part of you that you do not wish to see, or the part you cannot forgive yourself for? Listen to the silence of your soul, for within it lie the answers you are not yet ready to accept. So, what will you do when you look at your shadow and realize that it is the thing holding you back, rather than those you still blame? Forgiveness, at its core, is the path we must walk to recognize that this shadow is not an enemy, but a part of the journey to heal our own wounds. We have begun to identify the shadow, a shadow that does not merely arise from the actions of others, but from the reflections within ourselves. As I wrote in Ion, we cannot become aware of our shadow without the courage to confront it. And so, all the pain you are feeling is resistance, resistance to that shadow, the shadow you have refused to face for so long. Remember that the shadow is not inherently bad. In fact, it is an indispensable part of your individuation journey. As I stated in Man and His Symbols, the shadow is the part pushed out of consciousness, but is a vital component of the unconscious. It contains repressed energies, emotions we dare not face. Forgiveness is not about making others feel relieved, but about allowing yourself to break free from your own self-imposed captivity. Do you see? When you refuse to confront your shadow, you are only living in a world of illusions. As I quoted in the Red Book, the path to darkness is not an easy one, but it is the one that opens the door to light. Light cannot appear if we do not face the darkness. Those parts of ourselves we fear, dread, or reject. Forgiveness, therefore, is the light you seek. You cannot free others if you do not first free yourself. This brings to mind one of the most fundamental principles I emphasized in my studies, individuation. In this process, each of us must pass through pain and suffering to realize that we cannot escape the dark parts of ourselves. Forgiving others is not about their worthiness, but about completing yourself. In psychological types, I noted that confronting this shadow is a crucial step toward realizing our wholeness. When you acknowledge the dark parts of your soul, you recognize not only your greatness but also your shortcomings. We are not perfect beings but entities on a journey of individuation, a journey that cannot exclude reconciliation with the opposites in our psyche. We have spoken of darkness, but have you noticed that this darkness also contains your light? These are the parts you have forgotten. the possibilities you have never allowed yourself to explore. Your shadow is a part of you that you have not yet embraced. In the process of confronting it, you learn not only to forgive others, but to forgive yourself for not seeing that part of you. As I once said, forgiveness is not an act of benevolence toward others, but a critical step in liberating oneself. When you forgive, you not only relieve those who have hurt you, but also free yourself from the invisible burden you have carried on your shoulders. This is how you acknowledge the imperfections within yourself, by looking directly at your shadow and understanding it. This relates deeply to the reconciliation of opposites in the soul, which I discussed extensively in Ion and Symbols of Transformation, darkness and light. As in mythology, always coexist. There can be no light without darkness. There can be no wholeness without imperfection. Remember, it is by facing your darkness that you can see the light within yourself. Forgiving others is one step, but more importantly, forgiving yourself frees you from old obsessions, truly beginning your individuation journey. So, are you ready to face your shadow? Forgiveness is not an easy act. But when you recognize that it is an essential part of filling your soul, you will realize that the shadow itself helps you understand your wholeness. You can no longer avoid it. For this shadow is a part of you that you have never fully understood. Allow yourself to step into a new world where you not only free yourself from past wounds, but also illuminate the dark parts, making forgiveness a true inner journey, a path to inner freedom and harmony in your soul. When you step into the forest of your soul, you will realize that darkness is not the enemy, but a part of you that needs to be understood and accepted. In Ion, I spoke of the shadow as an eternal archetype, always present within each of us, whether we acknowledge it or not. It is the reflection of the parts we have not seen, the parts rejected by society and ourselves. But only by facing the shadow can you fully reconcile the deep contradictions within your soul. The shadow, as I pointed out in Man and His Symbols, is not something evil, but deeply human. It is the traits, emotions, and thoughts we dare not confront. But when we begin to accept and understand our shadow, what we once saw as bad, we realize it brings awakening. Only by looking into the darkness can light flow into the soul. As I wrote in the Red Book, in it, I spoke of the process of differentiation and integration, a harmonization of opposites in the psyche. And it is within this journey that you will find forgiveness. The forgiveness I want you to consider is not a mere act of compassion toward an enemy, but an act of liberation for yourself. Your inability to forgive is not due to a lack of compassion, but because you have not yet recognized the dark parts within yourself. Forgiveness is an act of confronting those parts of yourself. You refuse to acknowledge your shadow anger, fear, regret. All these may be parts you have overlooked. But when you forgive, you not only free others, but also liberate yourself from the unconscious chains of pain. Remember, forgiveness is not a bestowal of grace from on high. Instead, it is a deep understanding that everyone carries a shadow, the unperfected parts, the unhealed wounds. If you cannot forgive, you will continue to carry that darkness, and it will continue to influence your actions. You have seen the shadow, you have recognized it, and now is the time to confront it, not to forget it, but to reconcile with it. Let us return to the pages of the Red Book, where I wrote, the path to the self is one you cannot avoid. Whether you wish to or not, this is the path you must walk. You cannot forgive others if you do not first forgive yourself. Freeing yourself from the shadow of others is, in truth, freeing yourself from the invisible chains you have placed upon yourself. The shadow of others is, in reality, a reflection of the unhealed parts within you. When you recognize and forgive, you not only lighten the burden for others, but also gently release the shadow weighing on your mind. In Ion, I also emphasized the importance of reconciling opposites. The shadow cannot exist without light, and light cannot come without darkness. The shadow and the light, like two sides of a coin, always coexist within each person. By facing your darkness, you discover the hidden light within it. Forgiveness, therefore, is a journey of self-awareness, a step toward harmony between the opposing archetypes within you. You may see that in this journey, you are working with the deep archetypes I described in psychological types. The shadow is one of the fundamental archetypes, but like other archetypes, such as the anima, animus, or persona, it cannot be eradicated. It is a part of you that must be recognized and reconciled. Forgiveness is the next step in this process, a reconciliation, not only between you and others, but between you and yourself. Now, you have entered a critical phase in your journey. Let the shadow become your companion, not to criticize or banish it, but to understand and reconcile with the unexplored parts of you. As I said, you cannot be a whole person without reconciling with your own darkness. At the final stage of this journey, you will realize that the forgiveness you have long sought is not something to be given or received from others. Forgiveness is an act of self-liberation, freeing your soul from the invisible chains you have placed upon yourself due to unresolved pain. Forgiveness in this context is an individuation journey, a meeting with a shadow you have refused to acknowledge. The symbols I used in Man and His Symbols, such as the mirror or the forest, are vivid images to help you become aware of the unconscious parts of yourself. When facing the shadow in the mirror, you see yourself reflected in aspects you could not previously see. But when you accept this shadow, you not only see yourself more fully, but also realize that in the light of awareness and forgiveness, you can step into a more complete state. I want you to imagine a faint light illuminating the forest of your soul. That light comes from forgiveness, but not from an unconditional act of giving, but from a long process of recognition and reconciliation. In that process, you will see that your shadow is no longer threatening, but becomes a part of you. One you no longer need to fight or flee from. The shadow is not the enemy, but a companion in the journey to becoming whole. As I wrote in Ion, the shadow is not merely darkness. It is the part of the self we refuse to acknowledge. And in that acknowledgement, the shadow finds light. This means that only by accepting your shadow can you truly find wholeness within yourself. This is the final step in the individuation process I described. In this process, forgiveness is not an external act, but an inner transformation, where you truly see that your shadow, though it may carry anger, pain, or resentment, contains parts that have not been understood or loved. You can forgive not only others, but also yourself for not fully recognizing those aspects you have rejected. Let each step you take become an affirmation of wholeness, a deep connection with the self. Forgiveness is not an act of the weak, but of the strong, those with enough strength to confront themselves, their darkness, and the unhealed parts of their soul, and from there you will not only forgive others but find peace within your own soul. Write down your thoughts. As I encouraged in the Red Book, record your dreams, your emotions when facing the shadow. And remember that in every darkness there is the light of awareness and reconciliation waiting for you. This is a journey of rebirth, of returning to your true essence, a journey only you can undertake, but one that leads to eternal freedom. Therefore, I encourage you, as I did with my patients, to continue this journey with courage, confidence, and an open heart. Forgiveness is not easy, but it is the only thing that can bring you to serenity and wholeness. Let the light from your shadow illuminate your soul and guide your path forward. And so, you have come a long way. You have faced the darkness in your soul, recognized parts previously inaccessible. However, this is only the beginning of a long journey, one you might understand as the ceaseless transformation of the self. The shadow, though identified and confronted, will always be a part of your soul. Throughout your life, you will encounter it in different forms, under different lights, as a constant reminder that wholeness is only achieved when you can reconcile with all that you carry within you, both the light and the dark. As I once said, the reconciliation of opposites within oneself, between the self and the shadow, between light and darkness, is the only path to freedom. That is why the journey of forgiveness is not a destination, but a continuous process. A path that opens to transformation and unending growth. In psychological types, I describe the division between the archetypes within us. But when you accept your shadow, as you no longer distinguish sharply between light and dark, but instead integrate them to create a complete whole, as light cannot exist without darkness. The self cannot be whole without the shadow. In this confrontation and acceptance, you find yourself. Perhaps you will wonder, after all you have been through, what you must do next. The answer is to continue facing yourself, to keep looking into the mirror, to keep conversing with your shadow, and as in dreams, where the unconscious parts of you speak of things yet to be recognized, listen to the reminders from your inner self. Do not let confusion or fear lead you away from this path. I will conclude with a reminder from Ion that I wrote. Whoever cannot face their shadow will never integrate the opposites within themselves and will never achieve the wholeness their soul craves. Therefore, I urge you to keep searching, keep listening, and keep forgiving not only others, but most importantly, or yourself. Only by facing the darkness in your soul can you realize that this darkness is merely a part of the light, an essential part of the journey back to yourself, to the true you. And so, the journey you began with, the shadow, has reached its fruition. But remember, this ending is not a conclusion, but a new beginning. A complete cycle of growth and transformation. You have passed through the door of the unconscious, faced the dark parts of your soul. And in that moment, the truth has been revealed. As I said in Man and His Symbols, only when we face the shadow can we truly see ourselves. It is this confrontation that helps you discover the unrecognized parts, the hidden corners of yourself. That is where individuation begins, where you become not only a complete person with both light and dark aspects, but a whole being constantly evolving. But to move forward, you must pause for a moment and ask yourself, is it time for me to fully integrate with myself? You may not always find the answer immediately. This journey will last a lifetime, for the transformation of the soul never ceases. As I wrote in Aeon, forgiveness is not just for those outside, but for yourself. If you cannot forgive yourself, you will never be whole. Forgiveness is a process of acceptance, a reconciliation between the opposing parts of the soul, between the self and the shadow, between light and darkness. It is the confrontation with the shadow that brings liberation, for only by embracing both sides of yourself can you truly be free. So, I invite you to keep exploring, to keep looking at yourself. Do not fear the dark parts you find in the mirror. Remember that creativity and freedom come from not fleeing from parts of ourselves, but accepting them as inseparable parts of who we are. Walk this path with courage. Let the light of awareness illuminate each step. You will never be whole without passing through this confrontation and forgiveness. That is what I hope you understand. And that is the path of individuation, the path to inner freedom and peace.